afternoon.
Here.
Yes.
Still here.
Yeah.
How long has you all been practicing that one? I am present, ma'am. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Teresa. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Doing great, great, great.
Are we doing an invocation, Mr. Mayor?
Absolutely. Reverend McDowell, would you bless us, please?
Lord, for this day and for all that you've done for us, for the blessings of this time, this harvest time, for the winds of the Spirit that blows on us and in us and through us. We ask that you might bless us and touch us and yet sensitize us to the issues of this city of ours as it continues to expand and grow. We ask it in your name.
Amen.
Thank you so much, Councilman McDowell.
So, Mr. Mayor, it is always a blessing to staff when we have a few weeks off to get caught up. But then the reality hits that we've had a few weeks off to get caught up, and having not had a council meeting, we've got a lot to cover today. So, excuse me in advance if I'm a little pushy today. I'm just going to try to keep y'all on schedule.
How's that different than usual?
I don't know.
I was just curious.
Sometimes I'm a little, lighter about it. Today I'm probably not going to be. So, and the other reason is I have a hard stop, which you don't have to. I know, Mr. Mayor, you may have to.
I may also have one.
Have to run out too, but I have got to just go out for a brief moment at around 5 to get my child, who I haven't seen in 4 days. She's been on a retreat with school. No electronics. Haven't talked to her. I really need to see her today at 5:30. So, yeah.
They're in the DTs.
Yeah,
Camp.
I'd recommend we take a hard stop at 5 and pick right back up before 6 p.m. meeting.
Sure. Okay. That'll be fine. Ms. Jeff is prepared to keep going if we need to. But I think if we are, if we're good with our time.
Let's be efficient.
Yeah, we need to be efficient today.
rock and roll.
All right. So we're going to start with a continuation of a discussion we've been having regarding the implementation of a commercial corridor redevelopment program. And we, as staff, have been working on several action items in that regard. So we want to start with the parking side of things. Parking improvements, Miss Missy Gentry, our Assistant City Manager, and Miss Elle Matney, Director of Parking Services. Of course, this program, as we know, is a pilot to be started in the 5 Points corridor. So a lot of what we say today can be implemented potentially citywide, but with a focus on 5 Points. Elle?
Thank you, ma'am. Mayor, City Council, City Manager, thank you for giving me a few moments today to talk about one of the things that Elle enjoys so much, and we know that is parking in Columbia. To be efficient with our time, we'll move forward with a couple of facts that you may or may not know. That 96% of the time a vehicle is parked. 0.5% of that time they're looking for parking, often setting in traffic. And 30% a vehicle is driving around, circling, looking for that ultimate parking space. So let's talk about some parking improvements we have on the horizon here in Columbia. A quick look back at how far we've come. So the parking meter that you see on the top left, we still have some of those Dunkins right here in Columbia. And the gentleman in the top right photo, that was how we collected meters back in the 50s. As you can tell, we've come a long way. No longer are we a place in Columbia that we pull up to the curb right out front, and often, as we can refer to, as tying the horse up right out front. Columbia has dynamically changed over the years. So let's take a look forward in smart devices for smart cities and where we're headed. We have on the top left smart meters. They accept multiple forms of payment, dynamic pricing that we've talked about many times, and improved enforcement. On the top right, we have a multiple space pay station. Again, multiple forms of payment, dynamic pricing. They generally come in 2 versions. The larger ones that can maintain surface lots for up to 25 spaces, and the smaller that can maintain up to 12 spaces, such as a pay-by-block that we would hopefully see along Main Street soon. Passport parking, as we know, was implemented 3 years ago, and we have crossed over now 1 million transactions with passport parking, doing very well here in Columbia, as well as being recently selected for one of 14 test markets with Google Maps. Passport parking and Google Maps are forming a partnership, and we have been chosen as one of the 14 cities. More to come on that. That is just being presented to us. As well as merchant validations. Passport parking has updated their merchant validation options. Vehicle detection sensors is on the horizon. They can be placed in ground, surface mount. There are multiple apps that you could pull up on your mobile device or many of the newer vehicles navigation systems, and it will tell you where you have parking available based on these sensors. It will also help integrate with more efficient enforcement.
What do you mean by help with enforcement?
The turn of space on the spaces that are occupied, so if a particular block is not full of vehicles, we may not need to take time to go down to enforce that block. Some of the technology will actually tell you if they're paid or not paid right from a device. So you will know when you look down the 1600 block of Main,
Yeah.
that vehicle has not paid, nor has this vehicle. So technology is really.
Will it tell you how long that vehicle's been there?
Some technology does, yes. So that they could also be cited for timed parking in addition to lack of payment. So some of the existing opportunities that we have is parking availability itself, both on-street and in our DEX facilities. Parking rates, the on-street demand pricing that we continue to discuss and present options in the near future. And the infraction citation fee structure that we have in Columbia. And in a moment, you'll see how that compares to some of our neighboring cities. Enforcement, we have a continued issue on both sides of the fence with short-term parking, our metered spaces. Local staff members taking up that viable on-street space in the evening, nights, and weekends. We have USC hub students who are parking along Main Street and on-street parking spaces versus parking in various facilities, as well as local hotel guests who may, we find, not want to valet their vehicle. They're taking up these high real estate parking spaces.
Yeah. What is this? Help me to understand this. Infraction citation?
That's how much an average citation would cost you if you're here in Columbia, and we'll see in just a moment what other cities, to give you an idea where we, for the average expired meter citation is $8, what other cities may be imposing on our parkers. And some go as high as $44.
Now, yeah, will we also cover residential parking?
We do not today, but I'm open
But
to
that's-
listen to any concerns.
Correct.
And we are working on our curb management. We have lots of hospitality inquiries and an overall growth need for taxi, Lyft, Uber, the couriers, the bike lanes. We need to take a close look at our future curb management as we begin to implement many of these programs. This is a snapshot of what's happening in other cities across the country as far as expired, extended enforcement, increasing meter rates. They're dynamically being utilized. If you want to park along Main Street, maybe that'll cost you $3 an hour. If you want to walk a block, maybe it's only 50 cents. So the dynamic pricing with some of the technology will certainly make it much more viable for the city. On the horizon, continued marketing of short-term on-street versus the long-term social media, having a more stronger presence in social media. Deck facility maps, we are finalizing. We are going to generate oversized posters with maps and information about parking throughout Columbia and all of our parking facilities, and promotional parking incentives. getting the word out there, where it is recommended you can and cannot park. Enforcement, extended hours of enforcement. Parking services, along with city management, would like to recommend Monday through Saturday enforcement, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m.
Citywide?
citywide.
Really?
Fee structure would be potentially determined by the space, the block itself, or we can maintain the pricing by time of day. So maybe we don't determine the 1600 block of Main is going to cost $3 each and every day, but at 6 o'clock, it may cost you $3 until 12 midnight. We have the ability to control that with this technology.
And again, I want to make sure we move fast. The extended hours of enforcement. Help me understand 9 to 9. Does that help move cars? Does that help? What's the practical effect of that?
Yes, sir, it does. It actually turns those spaces in the evening and weekend hours, where we see the hub students parking, where the hotel guests, and many staff members throughout our businesses are parking in those spaces. We physically see them. So let's say I pull up to a meter and I can feed it at 5 o'clock for an hour because I'm working the night shift. They know that we're not going to enforce after 6, so that vehicle is there for the remainder of the evening. So we receive the complaints from the local businesses that no one has a place to park. There's no parking along Main Street. No one can run into my business, pick up food at my restaurant. We see the appeals come from staff workers that there's nowhere to park. I just ran in, it was raining, so we know staff members are taking up those spaces. So by extending the enforcement until 9 o'clock, we'll turn those spaces. If you want long-term parking, there's multiple facilities that you can park in. But those on-street should be a couple of hours, you're in and you're out.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it may be something to consider, in 5 Points and other places, and even in Vista, wherever, where we have space to encourage, workspace parking where, guys, you gotta walk a block, but you could have reduced or no expense if you're working, you're a registered employee. That was kind of the purpose on some, but like, if you ever been around during the shift change, it's amazing. You watch them, they come out of the restaurants or wherever they're working, hop in their car, and they're taking all the premium parking for that period.
Hey, let me ask you a question, whether or not it's even been thought of or even considered. Around the county building where folk are constantly moving in and out, parking in and out, pay taxes, property taxes, and all that kind of stuff. There has been some concern when I talk to folk that by the time they get there, and of course, if there is a long line there, it runs out and then they're ticketed. Have any thoughts been planted as it relates to parking around that county building?
Not at this time, but we could certainly visit that. And some of those meters maybe need to extend beyond 2 hours. But what happens, we're careful when we do, then the wrong folks tend to take up those fees.
Don't pay the taxes, it goes over here.
And we can't turn the space.
Yeah,
So
okay,
we can definitely look at that.
okay.
So another one of the initiatives, when we're talking about the fee structure, whether it's by space or block time of day, as other cities you may have been to have a flat rate in the parking facilities. So if you're in after 6, if you're out by 6 a.m., it's $5 flat, or maybe it's $3 to entice them for those longer-term parkers to pull them off the on-street metered spaces.
Early bird special.
Early bird, late bird.
But what'd be interesting is the time of day, because certain areas, like if you're, let's say 5 Points, you're in 5 Points before 11 o'clock, there's not a parking issue. But from 11 to 2 is prime lunch, which creates, and then you have a gap, and then you have the evening, which obviously turns in, so looking at time of day and blocks of time may make more sense in the future. And have a higher rate, so you're encouraging the turnover, and especially since we have multiple parking options. There aren't
And just a little sidebar that we may or may not come back to, but for the Thanksgiving holiday, the city will not have enforcement citywide. Traditionally, that's what we've tried to do in the last few years to encourage shopping, local business, et cetera. 5 Points, well, we're hearing both trains of thought, but I guess last year or the year before, they were very adamant that they wanted enforcement. So we're gonna have to deal with that and make a decision. You know, I like to be consistent and do what we're doing citywide. But to your point about 11 to 2, or I don't know what the time frame for Black Friday or the day after Thanksgiving, that if you did enforcement in 5 Points, what would you do? So
we've been on
what
both
time
ends.
from what to what?
11 to 7. And on both ends of that spectrum, they were upset that we did, they were upset that we didn't.
Right.
So,
So,
bringing that up, is it possible for us to utilize 2221 to encourage the folks who are working and stuff to use that during that weekend? The
Absolutely.
state offices, if they're still there, will be closed.
yeah, we've already thought about that because that's what we want to go to ultimately anyway. But we can try it. It'd be the first time we've tried it, and we thought about that, or Missy and Elle brought that to my attention. I think there's also the thought that I don't know if people will do it because it's new, but anyway, that's an option.
You know, I don't know if the convention center has events planned that day, but, you know, that parking lot ought to be utilized for shopping, et cetera, in the Vista during the holiday weekend if they don't have an event.
Is that parking and shuttling from the convention center?
The shuttle's your 2 feet.
So we don't want to belabor that so we can stay on time, but that is something as staff, we're going to have to make a decision about in the next few days.
You
And
talking about just on Thanksgiving Day or Thanksgiving weekend?
Just on
that
Black
Friday, the Friday after
We
Thanksgiving.
don't normally enforce on the Friday after Thanksgiving. It's a big day for the merchants.
Never have. Thursday and Friday.
So everybody else seems to like that, but, 5 Points is not, so we'll talk about it.
The merchants are asking for it?
Are asking for enforcement. Some are. We've asked for a hard line as far as the Merchants Association. What is your take on this? So we know
Have you gotten?
I don't think so. Not clearly.
Divided.
Offered up 2221 would make a difference in that discussion, I think.
I'm not talking about 5 Points, I'm talking about Vista.
Oh, they love no enforcement. Everybody else is fine with it. Yeah. Everyone else is good with no enforcement.
So we
Strong
did,
opinions on everything else.
I don't want to
Just not this.
misspeak, but that's
we
correct,
did
right?
last year advertise, though the state owned the facility, we signed an agreement, and we did promote it. I don't know if it was utilized, because it was
2221?
mostly- Yes, that's correct. We did advertise that, with Amy Beth last year. So I don't know if it was utilized, because it's during the day, there's not as much concern.
Let's make it available, let's remove the obstructions to doing business in 5 Points, let's make it available to everyone. And I think we should enforce, but obviously, without some clear direction from the Merchants Association, I don't want to do that without consensus, but.
You think we should enforce in 5 Points?
We honestly, we do something there, we're either loved or not loved, blamed for everything, so y'all,
I mean, my recommendation is that we're consistent citywide and we don't enforce, if that's what we've been doing, and that's been well-received everywhere else across the city, with maybe the stronger promotion of 2221 Divine for 5 Points.
Even the other Divine lot next to the police department's underutilized on these types. I mean, their parking options,
Sure.
The only way that's gonna be successful is if the merchant themselves, the boss, tells the people, you park at 2221.
Right.
Or you park at 2021.
That's true.
And this problem of the employees parking in prime property goes back years and years and years. We had it long ago. Mm-hmm. But the key is getting the boss to say, you've got to park over there.
Sure. Well, just FYI, in case you hear about it, but we'll make a decision unless I hear from you all otherwise strongly.
for it.
So, okay.
all right.
Thank you. Okay.
So the box you'll see on your bottom right is a few examples of what other cities offer as expired meter citations. So we in Columbia are at $8. If you go over to Savannah, it's 20. Knoxville has 11. Charleston's up to 30, and then Portland's at 44. As well as also what their enforcement hours would be, and it does vary, whether it's 7 o'clock, 8, or 10 o'clock. Where you will see a variance in some of the cities is their dynamic pricing, that they do have some of this innovative technology, and they have it broken out more so by zones or time of day. So you'll see a little bit more of that versus the variance in enforcement hours. Because again, as we become ambassadors, wanting you to pay rightfully for the parking, be in the appropriate space and move along. It's not about issuing everyone citation, but we want to protect that space for our business community. So that gives you a bit of a perspective of other nearby cities.
Handicap parking. How's that gonna be treated any different?
It wouldn't be.
Same.
What are you working on?
I was wondering.
I'm
the
afraid, I'm
same
afraid to
thing.
pick my nose, man.
So with regards
Picture
to,
you'll take.
I know, as soon as I go in there, the camera's gonna start clicking. So,
we've been in discussion of the 10-point parking plan.
I apologize, y'all.
Carry on, Elle.
Please, Al,
Thank
please.
you, thank you. A few updates with regards to some of the updates over in 5 Points. Again, we've been talking and partnering with various groups for a few weeks. So some of the recommendations and solutions, there was an update of construction plans in compliance and prepare for rebidding at the end of the calendar year. We're finalizing the plans in preparation for construction sometime late spring in 2020. So that is progressing forward. The extending of enforcement hours to generate the needed turnover as presented, we recommend that that is citywide, not only for our 5 Points folks. The dynamic pricing model, we are currently in review of various vendors, equipment, and products that integrate with our current systems. There are some wonderful products on the market, but we don't want to work with 10 systems and vendors. We want to narrow it down to 2 or 3. So that eases the pain over in parking as well as the lovely friends in accounting. So we are continuing to partner with area businesses and promote availability in remote areas over in 5 Points. Again, that is a continued message partnership. We can give them the information and the guidance, but we necessarily can't make those businesses and entities make their staff park there. Because, for example, up on Divine Street, I mean, that's free currently. Would be complimentary. So I know we have the daytime versus the nighttime, so we have to continue those conversations.
You definitely have to, because employers that allow employees to take up special or precious parking, it impacts their business also. See, and I don't know if they understand that. It may be your employees that's not allowing meters to turn over in front of your space.
I think, for Divine Street, there's talk among the property owners of trying to work together to create some kind of agreement between each other to let people share more parking and utilize the spaces that aren't being used at night and on the weekends by the businesses that are only open, Monday through Friday. So I think there's some discussion there. I think the big key will be figuring out, how they work that out among themselves.
That's important. We have business owners that have actually taken photos of other businesses' staff members and sent that to parking services. So again, we can be the communicator, but we can't necessarily knock on your door and close down your business because your staff
are breaking the rules.
So what is your timeline for getting agreements from the business groups in these areas against what you want to do, what you want to implement?
With regards to staff parking or extended enforcement?
Well, I think, I'm looking at extended parking by employees in particular.
We very much believe extending the enforcement hours will rectify a lot of those evening parking misparkers, if you will. So the staff that's parking there during the evening and weekend hours, that will stop. Because you cannot refeed the meter. So many of the meters, whether it's 30 minutes or 2 hours, you have a blockout period, and I mean, you can't refeed the meter. So I think they'll get the message and further discuss what other options, if it's some of those other lots in the areas or whether it's Divine Street for 5 Points. We do offer hospitality parking for many of our service industry businesses throughout the downtown area. So they do have options there where, but often it's the convenience of parking right out front. So we are also continuing to develop a plan for the connectivity between 5 Points and 221 Divine. If it is lighting, if it's the sidewalk, we're enhancing that entire walkability, the connectivity between 5 Points in general and the Divine Street parking facility. I was going to skip right ahead and do yours. Any questions, thoughts, concerns?
One of the things we'll need feedback from council on regarding the enforcement, I mean, we're not asking you to pull the trigger today, but 5 Points has, since a lot of this piloting of things is happening there, they have asked for the extended enforcement. The question would be, as Elle is recommending, that you go citywide, or do you pilot it and start off only in 5 Points?
Let's pilot it and see how it goes. I mean, I think everything we do that's new and different, let's do at least an unscientific baseline, see what merchants think beforehand, and see what they think afterwards. And it might give us some more guidance, particularly if we're not getting clear direction from folks as to what they exactly might want. So let's pilot it and go from there.
Do the boundaries, if you do take College Street and Blossom Street and create kind of the center, use that as the boundary, I think, for the pilot would make sense. And then you could expand it out from there, but that gives you the kind of the meat of 5 Points. Because once you get from Chick-fil-A up,
Well, not a lot of parking there anyway, though, right? I mean, I think, I assume if you want to do 5 Points, you want to do all 5 Points, right? Yeah, I think we do 5 Points. Let's just do 5 Points.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah. Let's
boundary it by that.
execute there. I'm willing to do the whole city, but I mean, let's walk and run,
impact it's gonna
and maybe with the clear intentions of if it works well, we'll go everywhere. That's a huge psychological change, paradigm shift in the way in which we park. So let's just see if we can get some type of useful data, including some opinions on the process before and after. Okay? Oh, you will. You will. All right. Thanks.
No, anything else specifically as far as direction you need besides those items, that item, and then, of course, we're moving forward with the lot and getting that bid. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Al.
And good afternoon. This is a very quick follow-up to parking in 5 Points, very specific here, and we're talking about zoning requirements. So this was the request, was to review heightened parking requirements for 5 Points businesses, and so we're talking about parking. Currently, in the 5 Points overlay, all uses have a 20% reduction for parking. And if you are a use that has a demand of 3.5 spaces per 1,000 or less in existing buildings, you do not have to provide parking other than what's there. So that includes office uses, retail. It was intended to try to encourage those businesses to locate in existing buildings. So we have here for your consideration two options for amendments. One is based on some of the conversations we heard from 5 Points folks, which was to extend that exemption for providing parking in existing buildings to uses with a demand of 5 spaces per 1,000 or less. What that would do is extend it to uses such as yoga studios, doctor's offices. So it would not extend that exemption to restaurants or bars. The other option is to eliminate parking requirements, just bring it down to a 0. You could do this either for existing buildings or for new construction.
So just for clarification, the Sheraton Hotel on Main Street was not required to have any parking.
Correct. And that is not because of the exemption, but because of the C5.
Right.
That we,
So that's not a new concept is my point.
not at all. Mm-mm.
Because of what was the?
The C5 zoning district, which takes up most of your central business district, has no parking requirements. And in the new code, we are extending the elimination of parking requirements to a greater swath of the central business district.
What the code requires and what your banker requires are two different things usually.
Yes.
So, or your investors. Okay.
And sometimes we are concerned about eliminating parking requirements in areas adjacent to residential districts, but we aren't here because all of the districts generally have residential parking permits. So they're already covered with that protection.
Yeah. And fitness studio uses a lot more parking than everybody realizes.
Yeah.
If you go down Divine Street, you see it as the classes turn.
That overlap.
But we include for-profit and nonprofit doctor's offices? That was a joke. I didn't want
I
to
like
start a whole
that.
other conversation. I know. I just wanted to get you guys going a little bit.
And so either of these would just require a text amendment that's fairly easy to draft, bring it to Planning Commission and to City Council, whatever the direction is. And that's it. That's all I had for you.
Interesting having these two conversations back to back. So, all right.
Should that parking requirement be tied to the height restrictions that you're also studying? Let's say we have a hotel that wants to build in 5 Points, and it's going up 75 feet and have,
I think it ought to be anything that's 4,000 feet or less
I got you.
from a business standpoint, because if you do, like you said, a hotel or a big retailer, it kind of changes the dynamics, but anything else that fits in that village, which I think 4,000, tell me if I'm wrong, that's the average, a big space down there.
Yeah. I mean, you have some larger, but you're right. That's about what you're looking at, maybe a little
So,
bigger.
I mean, I think if you're looking at that, I think that makes sense. I don't think you can just say everything is, because you could end up with another hotel down the road. Something could happen at, behind Clausen's, because, they're actively pursuing air right, contracts. So, my recommendation be, we look at 4,000 and less.
So we didn't bring that discussion back today because that was another area where we had asked for some feedback from the merchants, the residents, and all. I don't think we've gotten that as of this past week. But we were prepared to talk about it today. I had informed them if they could, I think they're doing like a survey or something, but.
Mr. Rickman's plan is good. If we could limit it to a certain
Spaces.
size building and less, eliminate the parking, but if you get a biggie in there that's going to bring a lot of
Yeah, you can't.
cars,
Well, you
you need to have a restriction.
Is there more to what you were looking for feedback from?
Well, this is more just the parking.
Just the
So this is a
parking
bit of a
piece.
twist, and we can certainly look at that. What we can look at is the average kind of square foot in there, as well as, so would that be for new construction and existing buildings? Because we do have some larger existing buildings, and the exemption currently extends to them, which probably you want to keep. So you're talking about new construction. You'd want to
Yeah,
limit.
but how many of those larger ones, I mean, I'm trying to think of what's dynamically different, because some of those buildings always had multiple businesses in them.
Yes. I mean, it's some of your newer buildings that are the larger buildings, some of your banks and going up further towards,
Yeah, but
Gervais.
they already have existing parking, so
They do.
they wouldn't be, but those guys that are sandwiched in between and like, Lynn Sky's building,
right?
you know, she's gonna be empty for a year now, so she's got, whoever's gonna have to go get a variance to get in there, cause there's,
Well, she
Well,
can do
depending on what
office
they
or
do.
retail now.
yeah, but
With
but
no
what happens if she
requirements.
wants to do a breakfast place, for example?
Yeah, that would require parking. She'd have to get a
So,
variance.
and there's, you know, for breakfast in that period of time, there's not competition, so I'd like us to look at that amendment change and do it, you know, do 4,000 feet or less.
You want us to bring that back as a recommendation? And the only reason I keep kind of pushing and asking is because we'll make these recommendations, and we'd love to hear out of these two which you prefer. But the stakeholders, want to weigh in, but maybe not so much on this. We can move forward maybe on this, but the other part, I think
They're going to be working for a
Yeah.
little while, I believe.
I think I'm fine with both of them and fine with the amendment. I think obviously always being sensitive to if we're going to be in or near residential neighborhoods that we're aware of any impact that might have, but.
And all of those, fortunately, in this area already have residential parking restrictions, so, that first block.
Bring it,
The two, what's your preferred?
yeah, bring it,
Sounds like,
whisper with hot mics around them, that's very
Okay,
quick, though.
so I was asking Krista to state which recommendation with the addition that we would bring back to you, and that would be,
yeah, the
Option
4,000
two.
or 4 or 5,000 and below would exempt all parking requirements. And above that, we'd just maintain the status quo. And with the 20% reduction we currently have in this area. Is that good? Okay.
in progress today. Thank you.
Keep it moving.
All right. So next up, thank you, Krista. We will continue the discussion of these related action items with Ms. Melissa Lindler, Office of Business Opportunities Director, and she will go in a little more depth on a couple of things you all asked about previously regarding the Commercial Retention and Redevelopment, CRR program, with some updates and recommendations. Of course, this was formerly known as our facade program. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you, and a lot of people still call it facade. Specifically, in the 5 Points Plan, they reference the request for greater access to the facade program. We call that now the Commercial Retention and Redevelopment Program. And I wanted to give you a little more background. When we met a couple of months ago, and we talked about the key components of CRR, which is our Commercial Retention and Redevelopment Program, formerly facade. I will call it facade because people still refer to it as facade, and not to confuse it with our current pilot project. When we talked about the recommendation of expanding the existing CRR project or program into our current pilot program, Councilwoman Mayor Pro Tem Tamika Isaac Devine asked, and some others asked about the historical areas. Where have we been previously? And that's what we're going to talk about today. Where have we been? And thanks to Tanya, who doesn't throw away anything,
Right?
she's our archivist. She keeps all of our records. So, and Jerry Land too. She's been very active, as well as Brad. They did a lot of research to come up with these numbers to look at exactly where we've been. So since 1997, we've done 118 facade projects throughout the city for a total of $1.7 million. And 34% of that has actually come from CDBG. 38% from our Facade 505 program. That's program income when people pay back their loans that goes back to the principal and the interest. And 16% empowerment zone funding and 12% general fund dollars. Now keep in mind, this is to date. So the money that has been allocated for this fiscal year has not totally been spent yet, but we do have projects that are out for bid and that have been awarded. They just have not been expended yet. Now, I'm going to ask Jerry Lynn to come up and go into a little more detail about the 8 different program areas since 1997 that we've been in. Jerry Lynn?
Thank you, Melissa. Good afternoon. I am Jerry Lynn with the Office of Business Opportunities. I wanted to take you back through the previous target areas, which I am thoroughly familiar with, except for one, and that is the first one labeled OBO loans. Those were loans done between 1997, the early 2000s, by the OBO department, of which I was not a part of. But between Tanya and my records, we were able to discover most of the information about that area. It was not targeted. However, from what we see, we saw a focus on Main and North Main and a bit of Two Notch, with a smaller percentage just being anywhere citywide. For the NBIS 5 points, that was the Neighborhood Business Improvement Zone installed by the South Columbia Development Corporation. We did 2 slates. We did 5 points and the Rosewood Owens areas. You can see the timelines, the last line before the number of projects. There was some overlap. You can see the private investment and public investment and the years they were enacted and the total number of projects. The Business Improvement District will be probably one of the more familiar areas. We did that in 2010, I believe, starting 2011, 12, and that was the Downtown Business Center. After that, we did 2 phases to cover Main and North Main, and that was from Elmwood Avenue to I-20. And forgive me, the Business Improvement District, that is the 36 square blocks of the City Center Partnership territory. Main and North Main, we just talked about Elmwood to I-20. Also 2 phases for the next program area, Two Notch Road. We went from roughly Providence Hospital to Covenant, and the second phase was Covenant to the city limits, which was roughly Cushman and Pine Belt, where it becomes Forest Acres. The area we were in just before this current area was Faro and West Beltline, and we did a like 3,000 to 3,400 block of Faro Road, and 3,000 to 38 or 3,900 block of West Beltline. Right now, we are doing portions of Hardin Street, Gervais Street, Taylor, North Millwood, and Millwood. And you can see currently we are at 7 projects, and we just recently closed on a couple. A couple are in the renovation process, but that's the current standing, and that's the historical record. Any questions? Thank you.
The next couple of slides will actually give you a map to show you kind of like where those areas are. We've been in every district so far. Just gives you a visual of where we've been and some of the projects. Really small dots. Some of them are over each other, so you can't really see all 118, but they're there. And this is where we are now, and this is where we've been last fiscal year. We're also in the same location. As Jerry Lynn mentioned, we're currently in Hardin, Millwood, Gervais, and parts of Gervais and parts of Taylor. And there are the 7 projects that she mentioned that we've already awarded this fiscal year and last fiscal year. Andrews Auto Service, Trips Fine Cleaners, Caroline's Flowers, Montgomery Creative Styles, Star Beauty Supply, Grill Teriyaki, 813 Hardin, that's a recent, those 2 last ones recently closed. And the pending projects are currently out for bid, is that correct, Jerry Lynn? Morgan Realty, Free Times, House of Styles, and Mary's Beauty Salon. We did have 2 other projects that were pending when we previously met a couple of months ago. Those owners or tenants have since said they don't want to participate, so we do have funding available to do 2 additional projects. What we want to
Trainer
do.
happened to get out of the room right before Free Times came up. Was
was
that time?
timing.
Did he just walk in?
Yeah, he walked out.
He walked out? So one of our recommendations is why do we need to stay in the area? One, because we still have a great need in the current targeted area where we're in. And we also had a number of requests that came in for the side streets. So we mentioned at our last meeting that I participated in that there were a lot of inquiries and interest from the side streets off of Hardin Street, which is in our pilot area. So we have an overlay there of the side streets. but you also can look at our code, commercial code violations. There's some similarities there and correlations with those side streets and where our code violations are. So if we were to stay in this area, we could probably possibly address some of those other commercial code violations that we haven't had an opportunity to address along the side streets. Question? Oh, sorry, thought I heard something. Hearing things. So again, a recommendation for next fiscal year is that we stay where we are, because one, that's where the pilot project is. It encompasses the pilot. But also, we can expand it to the side areas that we weren't able to address with our initial funding. The other part of this is the increase in allocation for CRR funding by $10,000 as an incentive to encourage the recruitment of new businesses, either locating or relocating to the vacant and abandoned buildings in the targeted area. So this would actually increase the per award cap to $35,000 in those areas for abandoned or vacant buildings from $25,000. And of course, as always, we will request additional funding, not for only for our traditional CRR project, but for the expansion to include the vacant and abandoned buildings pilot. So with the changes, how does it impact our current CRR project?
More of a comment. I'll wait.
I'm sorry.
The way? Okay.
Yeah, I'll wait.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay. So our two programs that have been in existence will not change. The current CRR, the facade improvement loan will stay the same. The commercial improvement loan will stay the same. But the new piece will be the vacant and abandoned building incentive program. Again, an additional $10,000 for those interior or exterior improvements that they would like to make, in addition to the two loans that we have up there. So everything we would just level those up together. And then the incentive could also be used for the purchase of inventory, furniture, and or equipment required to operate the business, which is not something that you can do with the first two loans. And in order for them to be eligible for this loan, they would actually have to be approved, apply for and be approved for both the facade and the commercial loan. And none of the three loan programs would require a match. Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me. Facade. And that's the one that she implements, so she's very adamant about that 20%. I do apologize. Unless council wants to change that right now.
Those three things conjoined together, or?
Yes, sir. So it would be.
Potentially.
Incentive, yeah, if you would like. Mhm.
Well, that's some of the conversation we had a few weeks ago with some owners, some folk there on Farrow Road. And conjoining all of that, and expanding that whole emphasis.
Yes, sir.
Not only the facade, because everybody is totally familiar with the facade. You call that facade when it's retention.
Correct.
So putting that together, of course, poses a real advantage.
It does. Yes, sir. It does. And with everything that we do in the Office of Business Opportunities, everything is across departments. So one thing that we will be doing more of, and we'll talk more about this with Frank when he comes up to talk about the FOG program, but it would also have us interact more with code enforcement when it comes to the commercial code violations, as well as implementing the new vacant abandoned building ordinance that was just recently passed as well. So we could utilize those two tools to help make sure that we're meeting the greatest needs in this area.
The vacant building, it had to be greater than a year, though, to be considered a vacant and abandoned, correct?
Yeah. And we have some of those at 5 Points that probably meet that standard.
There's
Yes,
one
sir.
building that's been vacant for as long as I can remember. But it's because of the owners, not because of the.
Correct. Correct. But those are some tools that we have put in
Not
place,
because of the interest. Yeah.
hopefully to help us, do a better job at that. Any other
I'm not making any
questions?
faces on.
Mr. Rickman, you have a comment before they switch off? Did you have a comment before they switch?
Rock and roll. Rock and roll.
Okay.
And so again, another component that would help expand the CRR will be what Mr. Frank's about to talk about.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council, Ms. Wilson. Good afternoon. Let's see, there we go. At its September workshop, Council expressed a desire for staff to find innovative ways to help restaurant owners and property owners who might convert their property to restaurants. with ways to meet the city's existing fats, oil, and grease, or FOG requirements. Every restaurant has to have a way to pull that out of the wastewater stream so that it doesn't cause problems in our sanitary sewer system. One idea that we've been working on since that time, and we gave a brief description of it a few weeks ago, is the idea of having a FOG forgivable loan program that would be administered through the Office of Business Opportunity Commercial Retention and Redevelopment Program. We'd be working with Melissa and her folks. The idea is the technical review and the construction inspection that normally goes with a grease trap installation or a grease interceptor installation would still be done by the wastewater compliance section at Columbia Water, where that type of work is occurring now. The idea is to make this available to existing, and we call them FSEs, food service establishments, existing restaurants, or property owners who want, through economic development, to convert their properties to restaurants. The idea is to make up to $5,000 available per applicant with matching funds. It would be a 50-50 match toward the cost of labor, equipment, and material for the installation of a grease trap or interceptor. This would apply inside the city, not system-wide, because of course the Columbia Water system extends outside the city. The forgiveness requirement would be such that the applicant would need to be in business and compliant with the requirements that we have for 2 years, and at that point, the loan is forgiven. The idea is that this would be funded from Columbia Water revenues, and that we would, if the sense of the council is that you'd like for this to proceed, we're ready to put things together so that we could begin this on January 1st.
Frank, is the requirement for fat oils and grease, the FOG program, a city requirement, or is that DHEC and EPA?
Well, it's everybody. We have a city ordinance. The federal government liked our city ordinance so much that they incorporated it into our consent decree. So we lack a little bit of flexibility that we would have had, because even though this was a municipal ordinance to begin with, it's now in a federal document that we have to abide by. And the state also requires that this be addressed.
Most utilities in the state of South Carolina have a FOG program because it's required by other entities like.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. It's nationwide. This is a nationwide situation.
I think the two questions I have, one is I think one of the things that is not stated in here and I think would be important is the ability to work with the business at what options there are, because not everybody needs to put in a tank. Not everybody, it really, and I think that's one of the things that we haven't had a clear delineation in the past, so I think that'd be a good thing to add. The second, I was just curious what you're seeing the average cost is, because $5,000 from what I've seen and some of them that put in is probably a 10% of the total cost. So
It
the
could be.
reality of what we're talking about is massive, and I know there's some other neighboring entities that are doing some other creative things. So, you know, as I appreciate this, I think we really need to look at it a little more in depth and make sure that we include the options, but maybe look at a different way to create a balance if we're going to push to encourage some of that growth in those areas, especially in troubled areas where we have, you know, some of these folks are, I'm not even sure where they put a grease trap.
That's right. And I didn't expand on that because I was going to try to be brief, but staff is already working with applicants to find creative solutions, whether that means an above-ground grease trap in an alley that takes care of the problem, or a grease interceptor that's designed more vertically than horizontally because of confined space. But we understand that, and we're already doing a lot of that right now. There was an interest in combined grease traps at the workshop, and I'm going to plead new on this, okay? I didn't even realize it, but we were already doing that, okay? It has to be done very carefully, though, because the same laws of physics and science that cause fats, oils, and greases to build up in our sewer system would preclude us from having a regional grease trap where it travels 200 or 300 yards. It's just not going to go that far before it clogs the line. Grease traps have to be close to what they're serving.
But I think, and also in all fairness, you know, we put a lot of strains on the small business person to do that, but yet the biggest abuser of the system is our homeowners. And we have no requirement on them for anything.
Well, we do encourage them to can it, cool it, and trash it, but yes, you're exactly right.
Let me
Hey,
go.
I will bet you on Friday morning, if you went through about every neighborhood and put a skimmer through there, you'd find a lot of deep, fat, fried turkey grease.
This is probably not the week to crack down on that.
Let me,
Your mom didn't have the Crisco can on the side of
I have a big one where I put all my
Right
bacon,
there.
but I reuse it.
let me tag on to Daniel's point about the
War and Thanksgiving. Go ahead.
the smaller businesses. In my experience, has been those that are looking to occupy an existing building with a system that we approved in the past. And the challenge is to upgrade to the requirements, you know, that we place on them. And financially, that's not it has not been practical. So, especially again, when we look at areas where we want to see businesses, new businesses come in, I'm hoping that we could really make some allowances for some financial assistance and be flexible in the requirements that we're placing on them.
Yes, sir, we're looking for a solution. We're trying to work with the property owner
Yeah, and
to,
I've seen some systems that were in place that kind of makes you wonder how were they approved in the first place, and if it was good enough for the previous business under our rules, why would we change for a new business coming into the same facility?
yes, sir. That's a great point. I think the FOG program that we have dates back to about 2008, 2009. So, and of course, there were restaurants in Columbia prior to that time, so I'm not sure how it was handled back then. But, Councilman Rickman, to your point, if you're putting devices under kitchen sinks, which is one place that these
Right.
go, you may be dealing with a situation that's just hundreds, maybe $1,000, maybe $2,000. If you've got to go outside the building and put a pit that's 6 feet by 5 feet by 10 feet, you're probably up in the $10,000 to $15,000 range. So the price can vary wildly, but we felt like this was a good start anyway. And if we get started January 1st, the fiscal year is just 6 months down the road. We'll be coming back to you with hopefully some experience and success, successful stories, but some idea of the level of interest and the effectiveness of this amount.
I think the options of working with people, and figuring out really what the right fit is, because I think when we started the program, we had a pretty vanilla requirement that didn't have any flexibility and created some real hardships on folks. Other people have tackled it different ways, but I think that, to me, is probably the biggest point we can do, is make sure we're working on an individual basis, because there is no two buildings, unfortunately, are exactly alike.
No, you're right. There's one set of rules, but it is case by case by case.
So with that overarching premise of definitely looking at each individual situation, and having some flexibility, which I think the staff is doing, we would recommend the $5,000 to get started, and they're ready to do that per applicant. And combining that with, Melissa, what were you gonna say?
I was just gonna say that we do have other financing available too, through the Office of Business Opportunities for those distressed areas. And I think that we talked about, how can we help them? We have the SURF dollars, so we have a little more flexibility, so that may be a source of funding that we can use in those areas that you mentioned.
Okay. Yeah, well, I think we need to be creative, if not aggressive, in making that known to a lot of the smaller businesses. We still have some of them that don't want to come to us.
But the $5,000 would be for a $10,000 trap, because owner would put in 5.
Five.
We would put in 5.
Up to 5.
Up to
That's
5.
right. In matching.
Okay.
So we're at 3:04, and my goal's at 3 o'clock. We'd be hitting item 3, so we're doing pretty good.
Let's keep it moving.
That's a recommendation that we'll move forward with, Frank, thank you. Melissa's recommendation would be for funding as we hit the budget cycle. I think they're doing well right now with what they have, and is the recommendation received to stay in the area where the pilot is and expand on the side streets? Yes, okay,
Yes.
great. Thank you.
But-
So our next item, number 3, Economic Development Partners Update. Mr. Ryan Coleman, Director of Economic Development. I'm sure Ms. Kay Hampton is going to be assisting him, his Deputy Director. And again, this is a conversation that we have had before, and the last time that we talked, you all wanted, and I wanted the staff to bring back some more hard and fast recommendations on numbers for our partner agencies, their deliverables that need to be very tangible, and the funding to go along with that. So that is where we are, and we'll get started, Ryan.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. We are back today. We promised council we'd work on the economic development partner funding per the meeting in September. We presented council with a couple of different options as far as the funding for partners, maintaining things, going with very specific itemized scope of work along the lines of essentially just having a straight professional services contract with each one, and then provided some recommendations. We took council's feedback. We have come back today to get into some of those details with y'all as y'all would like to discuss. For the most part, the levels that we discussed in September are relatively consistent with what we talked about with council that day. One of the changes that we did make is there's another line item in there for the insurance technology and services cluster of it's SC. That had been formerly a part of Ingenuity SC and their scope of work. As that cluster group has come out from underneath their management, we've rolled that out and added an additional line item in there for your consideration. It's a not incredibly high funding amount, about $10,000. But these are all consistent with what we discussed, and we can definitely get into specifics on any of these. And we've laid out some individual items as well. This is kind of where our partner agencies come and fill in, working with various items along business recruitment, trip scheduling, entrepreneurship, small business development initiatives, retention and expansion of existing businesses, marketing, and then some assistance with talent retention.
One second,
attraction.
Ryan. Did all of you get your flu shots by any chance who wanted one? Because Nurse Sylvia's been there for you since a little bit before the council meeting, so if you need to do that, it'll only take a minute, just a quick sting.
It won't hurt.
For the first time ever, I actually took care of that well in advance,
Good, me too.
after being harassed by my children.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, sorry, Ryan. And
Yes,
Ryan, I
ma'am.
know you said it's consistent. I'm not contradicting you. I mean, there are changes, so we just need to go through each one.
Yes, yes,
I don't
ma'am.
want- I don't want the council to think we're bringing back them the same thing that we talked about in September, because there are some significant changes, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Right, and so at the bottom, the overall special projects funding for 1920 is $382,000. Of that, 204,500 is allocated to annual recurring funding of ED partner agencies, and you will see the breakout of how that's allocated currently. So the partners on top, Central SC Alliance, Ingenuity, the Technology Incubator, Columbia World Affairs Council, and ITology are the partners that we have recurring allocations and scopes of work with. As we've mentioned before, City Center partnership gets an allocation in lieu of taxes. There's the Mass General Interest, and then the Greater Columbia Chamber of Commerce is funded for some of the BRAC and military initiatives.
Now, the CCC budget is, those are monies that for operation or?
City Center Partnership?
Yeah.
Yes, when the bid was renewed in 2011, essentially what we give City Center Partnership is a payment in lieu of a tax contribution. So as the city does not pay taxes, that somehow they came to the amount that 70,000 was kind of the fair market value of what the city would contribute to City Center Partnership should we pay taxes. And then we've entered into a contract with them, and we pay that amount each year in lieu of a tax payment to the bid.
Just for clarification, and this, Ms. Wilson, this may be for you or not. When this was put together originally, that was prior to them getting hospitality money, correct?
CCP,
Yeah. And then-
years ago, you're
Yeah,
asking?
and then the second part really for me is, I guess, now never, probably have just overlooked it, but really should come out of general fund and not water and sewer because it's a general fund expense.
And it has moved around, I think, over time, so.
Yeah, I think part of
I'd
the,
have
maybe
to
even part of the
get-
rationale at the time was if we're focusing on economic development, you're expanding, more businesses and.
And that probably
But yeah,
wasn't the
yeah.
case in the beginning, but
Yeah.
now, I mean, they're fully funded, they're collecting a
Mm-hmm.
lot more than they ever collected before. So, anyway, I'm just curious.
Okay. We can do a little digging on when things changed. I have to get with Missy.
The intent of my question was just to see whether or not the $70,000 is a part of hospitality tax dollars.
That part is not.
No. And Mass ends this year, right? This is the last year?
Yeah, Mass will roll off this year. And here you can see the breakouts for the current recommendations for the partner agency funding. We've reduced Central SC, Ingenuity, Columbia World Affairs Council. There were a couple of other requests that came up around the time that we were looking at this. So you'll see a few of the items that we've added in at the bottom for council's consideration, as part of these reallocations. So Greg Hilton and his group, GrowCo, have started their new concept down in the Vista. They requested a funding amount for a period of up to 3 years, and the amount that we discussed last time was around $37,000. Midlands Technical College Enterprise Campus, $10,000 for them. The ITSSC down there at the bottom, and then some of the remainder could be allocated for the use of economic development grants.
When we met last, one of the requests I think we had is really for us to get kind of a memo. What have we gotten in the last 5 years from each one of those agencies? Instead of just looking at reducing their amount based on, part of it was to legitimize even giving them any money. What have we truly gotten? What has been the benefit been? What was the deliverables, and did they deliver those deliverables? And how in conjunction that should be tied into funding. And so I think, it's one of the things I'd still like to see, because it's great that we have a reduction, but we need to understand, do we still want to fund the groups that have been funded historically for a decade plus?
At the last meeting, I had that Excel spreadsheet, and of course I didn't bring copies of it for you guys today, but we went through and looked for 1 year. This is the first time I've heard of the 5-year analysis. Happy to do it. But that is how we came up with some of these line items and the reductions, by looking at, in the past year, their performance based off of what they said they were going to do in their SOWs.
I think we want to be able to have a clear line. I know there's some foggy lines there where multiple agencies taking credit for the same talent being recruited.
Well, I think one of the things too, to your point, Mr. Rickman, and at some point we just have to move forward, is that, Jeff and I talked to Ryan and Kay about with the benchmarks they're going to be challenged to meet and the deliverables you are asking for right now going forward with certain things that we're doing. There's a lot going on. what are the value adds for these entities that will pull in the direction of where we're asking them to go right now? So I get the history part, and it's sort of, I probably would say we should have taken the stance before now, but we're here, and so I was hoping that they would, take here's historical look, but be very deliberate and specific with these entities about what are the things they can do to assist us right now moving forward with the things we're asking of them.
What I'm hearing you say basically is that you've given them a pretty narrow scope that
Very.
can be measurable so that we come around to budget time next year, we'll know if they can deliver or not deliver.
Right, and I think Kay, you may, or Ryan, I know Kay was explaining it to me when I met with you both, an example of what you mean by that. So you were talking about, there's some allocation in here for certain things as far as them leads, and if you don't get that lead, then they don't get that funding.
It's all very specific, very tangible things, focused on output, focused on outcomes. The usage of funding for overhead, we've gotten away from that. That's why I kind of alluded to that near the beginning, that what we're essentially doing is we're providing an itemized professional services contract and say, here are the things that feed into our strategic plan as our office. Here's specific things that you can do to contribute to that, and that's what we're looking for.
I think you gotta have in there that, look, we're expecting X amount, and if they're not delivered, I think it's very important that we kind of draw the line at this point, and it can't just be leads and others. I mean, there's gotta
Sure.
be some real tangible, because some of this money, we ought to consider making a reel. We have a great opportunity. I think you ought to be involved in it, Mayor. Really do a reel about Columbia and get it out there. We're missing
So,
opportunity. We're not getting the marketing reach that we should with all these entities that are so-called providing services.
For that this year.
Ms. Davis?
Again, that's really been my general concern. If we're looking at, I thought we were looking at deliverables all the time, but I'm also interested in, if it's a matter of recruitment, bringing in investments, I want to know, where do they steer businesses, companies also? There are areas that could use some enhancement in terms of a shot in the arm from new businesses, new investments, and jobs creation. But I don't feel that with a couple of these entities that we've been funding for years. And if they can't show that, then I would not be inclined to continue to support them. And that's always been my concern. We've got, for example, a couple of industrial parks in the northern part of the city. And I venture to say that they're not on certain lists. I don't see and feel but some of this investment is being targeted in that part of the city. So that's a deliverable for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd like to see on paper areas that they can show companies and entities that they've had conversations with, talked with, then we also should be able to know what part of the city that they've been asking folks to take a look at, or that they can honestly sell. That's what I'd like to see.
Back to one of Daniel's requests, are we producing a document or a video or some type of marketing document that will be available by X date that we can start putting? I mean, there's so much good content out there already, we know, but to our purposes and When can we
Yes,
expect
we'll,
something?
we'll be working on a couple things this year, actually, internally, and I think we have the opportunity to do some of those in conjunction with these partners, where you want to do it around something industry-specific, as InsurTech, or do something around talent retention, attraction, or just the city
I think
in
we
general.
we need a package we need a reel that sells the city, and we don't need the partners involved in this. We need this to be out.
City focus, but yes, all the above, all what you just said. I mean, I think this shows the energy and excitement. And there's so much good content out there right now, but pulling those things together for our purposes.
Why is the city
including-
worth the investment?
Yeah. I mean, so, but having a hard target date to have something produced by, I think is so important. On the microphone, okay, I can't hear you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Find out.
I didn't understand the words you just said. Okay, all right. So assume that was intentional, okay. I would be remiss if I didn't continue to express to council and everyone else that I'm concerned about reducing the Central SC Alliance funding as well as Ingenuity. I support I think Growco presents some excitements. I've been an advocate for the Midlands Tech hardening of that relationship, and this is important. I've been an advocate, as you all know, in the past of increasing the Central SC Alliance's funding, understanding the role that they play in regional economic development and how central our positioning is in there, whether or not that investment lands in the four corners of Columbia, but certainly our folks don't all live, work, and play in Columbia. They work in the county, they work in Lexington County, they work in Newberry County and Kershaw County and the like. Now, we have been very clear in what some of our expectations have been, and there have been some challenges in meeting those expectations, so I understand that. But I still think that we play a larger role in the regional economy that's manifested in our funding of the Central SC Alliance. I would, again, I want to encourage everyone, I serve on Ingenuity's board since the organization was founded as the Columbia Regional Technology Council. The mayor of the city and the chair of USC has always served as the honorary chairs, for lack of a better term. I do believe the work that Ingenuity SC does is amazingly important in some tangible ways, but also the ways in which they get a number of stakeholders around the table. I've served on that board. I know Ms. Devine has. I'm not sure if she still does or not. I would encourage that more of us prospectively serve in a number of different capacities on these different boards. So it's not just me or Tamika kind of bringing back the good news. But so I've expressed this to you all a few times. So I'm not going to belabor those points. I did, however, make sure that chamber funding is held harmless. That's still the same. I mean, the role the ongoing role the chamber plays in keeping our eyes on future BRACs or whatever it might be down the road, and just keeping a steady presence in Washington is so important. So I want to make sure that that's not touched. So
I think the chamber is funded out of the general fund. We still manage that contract, but it is a little bit different than our special.
Mayor, I
I saw it on the chart. Just want to make sure that it wasn't touched.
One of the things that you all may want to just clarify a little bit, and we may have glossed over this, you said it, but the IDSSC $10,000 was a function of Ingenuity. One of the things that I encouraged the staff to do, as I just said, was to be more specific in every deliverable. So I thought, why don't you just go direct with them so you can get the specific video produced specific to that type industry or whatever else you might want to do with them, versus the money going through Ingenuity has become more of them project managing things, hosting meetings. I mean, sure, there's value for that. I'm trying to get Ingenuity we got to pay for what is going direct with the city. So it's almost like we were paying them to project manage for IDSSC. Is that fair?
That was a portion of it, yes, ma'am.
Also in your packets, you'll see the actual overall proposal from Ingenuity that sums their last year total And then on the next slide is how it got broken out. And I guess with Central, we don't have anything in there. It would be the similar SOW as before. They also are not sure about our
The status with the Central SC Alliance would likely change. We're not sure exactly what that would look like for the city. The standard membership for Central SC is $72,000 a year, and I think it has been that way since they were started initially. You know, when we went back to them and said, you know, we're looking for something that's very specific to the city, that's very tailored around returns and deliverables. There was some pushback there, but, you know, we kind of reinforced to them, this is the direction that council's given us. And so, you know, Mike did indicate if there was a change there that he would have to go back to the Central SC board, and we may not be a standard member with the alliance anymore. And that's something we have to consider and be comfortable with. I think we still want to participate in these partnerships with people, but I think we've been very clear with everybody, you know, that we need these things that are specific to the city, that are going to produce these outcomes over the next year.
What's the standard membership look like?
72,000,
It's all counties.
8 counties in the city.
University.
Good job.
The university, I think, pays 15 to 25.
They're a social partner. They don't get to play golf.
Let me.
Mr. Davis.
Central Alliance, I'm not going to comment on that, but I don't have a problem or any heartburns about ingenuity and the enterprise campus for Midlands Tech. I've been talking that up even when Sonny White was there about the relationship that campus can play in a city. You have a high school directly down the corridor, Eau Claire. And that campus has the ability to not just recruit, but recruit businesses that provide jobs in the immediate area. So I would hope that we can, I don't see too much.
We coordinated with the Enterprise Campus, working with Chuck Whipple on a $180,000 rural infrastructure grant that is helping provide some of the wastewater infrastructure out there to the back side of the campus, which those parcels were not previously served. And this was before our consideration here, you know, and I think that's a real tangible thing. You know, they've definitely brought value to the table in that aspect. And I think that's what we're looking for from everybody. You know, is things along those lines that are concrete and that we can point back to.
Yeah, I understand that, but the ultimate goal of the project, it's very creative in terms of the typical technical college in this state. Private enterprise on site. I think that's something that we could lend our expertise to, because we could, it's tangible to us. Tangible is really real solid recruitment and some high-tech jobs on that campus. And the students, it's a conduit for students graduating from that school. So, Mr. Mayor, I think that's something that we should really put the full forces of our economic creativity to provide some assistance.
Absolutely. I know we got to rock and roll, Teresa.
Yes, sir.
But the incredible work, I think whenever the time is right, get an update from Dr. Rames and Chuck Whipple and others, they're doing some really awesome work with Route 1 that they want to expand dramatically.
Right.
We got some creative ideas. We had a meeting scheduled. I had to reschedule last week.
And
to move that
co-brand the
forward.
city.
Oh, yeah, they want, it all makes sense, not just Eau Claire, but also Keenan as well, some
Right.
good stuff.
Keenan
like
right
that.
across the street,
Right
the
across the-
robotics projects.
Maybe last word to Mr. Badura?
I'm not sure if this has been talked about before, and I know we discussed this before. When it comes to Midlands Tech, I thought we were talking one time about maybe creating a culinary school. That would obviously be something that I think the city is interested in because it generates more students and hopefully create more jobs and opening more restaurants and that kind of thing. Is that a discussion we've had with Midlands Tech, that we can maybe start looking at maybe some deliverables from there?
Yeah, I seem to remember that at some point in time. We've not talked about anything along those lines lately, but if you'd like to request that, we can definitely reach
That
out.
would be something that we might be worth looking at it.
Sure.
I remember years ago we discussed it, Mo. I'm not sure.
We
I'm
did
not- yeah, I
last year
remember.
during the,
Yeah, but even before that, I mean, we had that.
I think that's something that would be tangible results that if they start opening or
Yeah.
looking at a program. And the USC program will not compete with them, because USC program culinary does not accept financial aid or anything like that. It just, this would be a accredited program that we can maybe help with.
We'll be glad to have a discussion with
So
them.
this would be an item, Mr. Mayor, that you all could take up this evening for action as an item discussed during the work session,
Okay, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Fund?
the funding
Ms.
amount.
Wilson, are you planning to go over this scope? And I've only got it today, so I'm glancing through it, but reading Ingenuity scope is way too broad. There's no way that you can do this.
I don't think
The
that's,
things she has in here.
That's their
and be
previous.
tangible.
So that is their proposal, and this is, what we felt like we could contribute to get out of what
Yeah.
they're doing.
I think, looking at it, it's,
This is their,
This
This is what
this is the ask, the demand, this is what's,
this is a response from the staff on what the dollars should be worth,
all right, we're gonna rock and roll.
which that's also in the
We want
PowerPoint.
to date certain on this reel, okay? On this video. So so when y'all done, when y'all finish whispering about it, come tell us something. ASAP, all right? Thank you.
Thank you, and you're fine with bringing this tonight, Mr. Mayor, council?
Bring this tonight, see.
Are you fine with
Yes.
acting tonight? Okay, yes. All right, we don't, oh, yeah, way overdue. All right, our final discussion item is the Kilbourne Road traffic calming measures. And Mr. Rickman, the Honorable Daniel J. Rickman, Mr. Rickman asked for us to revisit this item.
What?
So Jeff, Mr. Rickman is going to, I guess, kick us off on this item 4.
well, I think there seemed to be some confusion. I think we discussed it at our meeting that we were going to look into Kilburn Road, add it to the list of the streets we were looking to take over and maintain from the county to promote.
From the city, no, state.
Yeah. We talked about it, and for some reason, the minutes, Ms. Moore was glad to let us know there was some confusion, and I know Robert had not been able to talk about it at SCDOT because it didn't seem to be clear, so I wanted to bring it back up.
Okay.
To look at it. Speaking of traffic calming, it was very interesting to go in Decatur, Georgia, and look at what they've done downtown and in some of their high-speed corridors. And they basically took the 4 lanes and put it into 2 lanes. They took the parking row and moved it out 1, and took that parking row and added another strip of sidewalk and then a little thin bed with some type of grass that, kind of bounces off. But to encourage not only the merchants on that street, to utilize some more of the sidewalk space and have a separate sidewalk so they could keep things kind of moving without having to tear everything up. The other interesting part is they put out the bump outs, but it hasn't affected their traffic. The traffic slows down, but the volume's still the same, and they've had very little complaints. So when we talk about Hardin Street, Divine Street, Millwood areas, things like that, especially Divine, we're talking about you don't have to eliminate the parking. You can change it and cut it down to 2 lanes and still handle the volume that is coming, but make it much more safer for walkability and make it more of a neighborhood. And anyway, I'm gonna take some pictures of it tomorrow when I'm down there, send it up. But I thought it was very interesting what they did, and they said it was not that expensive to do because they
It's
weren't
very
having-
cool downtown.
Yeah.
It's very cool downtown.
Have y'all have any discussion with DOT about redesign of Hardin and Divine and Millwood?
We have not. I know it's still under consideration, and they're still doing the study on those, and I'm sure we'll get a full report once it comes up. If I could run through about 3 or 4 slides, I think this would kind of remind everybody of where we are and as a city. Currently, the city, our DOT owns about 69% of the streets. The city owns about 30%. There's 1% that are private. We've got about 400 lane miles of city streets, sidewalk, storm drainage, to include signage and signalization. The 2 slides I showed last time was, we did a pavement study back in 2011. This was done in-house. And our current rating was sitting around 78 or somewhere in the 80 range, which is really just a preventive maintenance. Our program has the ability to run itself forward. So what we've done now is we've got a current rating of about 65 or 67, and that's because we're not doing a lot of maintenance on our streets right now. So if we add something else to it, then we need to make sure that we can maintain. If you remember our conditioned pavement, we're sitting in about a 67, so right now we're in about a fair rating. So we need to look at the 30% of city roads that we currently have and take some kind of action on them. We talked last time about opportunities. Currently, there's no funding in our general fund. We do use that funding, if we have it, for leverage funding through CTC. We've got a couple CTC projects that are going on right now. One of them is in the Chestnut Hills subdivision where we just did a major rebuild. And the other one is we've got some money that's coming along for Germany Street that we'll probably take up to have the road deeded over to the city based on its condition. And the only reason we're taking that is because we've got that funding from them. We've also in the past got funding from CDBG, and we try to do public and private partnerships. Yes?
As those documents for the deeding of that piece of property right there by the stadium, has that been sent over to us, or? where
It
are
is,
we?
yes, it's sent over, and I believe they're preparing them now for council. I mean, it may be on the next week's agenda. I'm not sure yet, okay? It is? Erica said it was on the agenda.
Oh, it's not?
It is.
Oh, okay.
So the last thing is what we've done on Kilburn Road. Kilburn Road, according to DOT, is a major collector. So we've had neighborhood meetings with DOT. We've actually had 2 of them and listened to their concerns and tried to act on what those concerns were. One of them is speed humps. DOT has said no to speed humps based on the number of traffic volume and the amount of traffic volume that comes down Kilburn Road. 3-way stops, which David Brewer's always not been a proponent of. DOT is also not a proponent because 3-way stops generally don't work. We've got one in my neighborhood, and everybody runs it because they can look to the right and see that there's nobody else coming. So generally, nobody slows down or stops for 3-way stops. We did do an addition of the speed radar signs. I believe DOT paid for the speed radar signs. We actually installed them, and that's the ones like 5 points that flash to show you how fast you're moving. The police department set their speed trailer down there several times, and I know police has done quite a bit of enforcement down there. So that's currently what's been done on Kilburn Road. I told you I'd be brief. That's kind of the overview of where we are with our pavement management system and where we stand today on Kilburn Road.
Good deal.
So one of the challenges, and I spoke to you earlier about this, is we're having a lot of sinking roads. And almost all of the ones that I identified this weekend, walking around the district, are all DOT roads. And so we need to figure out how we do that. And some of these are repetitive. Converse, been fixed 2, maybe 3 times in the same spot. Chocora's got longer than this table like this, you got them going down Woodley, you got them, I mean, it's literally every DOT road.
Right, and I know we talked earlier, and if you will get those to me, I want to look at them from our perspective first to make sure it's something the city doesn't have any responsibilities from, and if we don't, we will get them straight over to DOT. So as soon as you get them, Robert Sweat, myself, or somebody will ride by them and take a look at them.
Well, I'm familiar with what he was talking about, and a lot of those, I think, are the water system. And then there's a whole nother batch of them that are the fault of the communication companies that are digging up the streets, putting in these high fiber optics, especially the small ones. They're about 2 feet by 4 feet, and you see them going down the street, and they'll last about 6 weeks, and then they start sinking. And then, so you got a big pothole out there that looks like it's caused by the city, but it's really caused by the.
And that's why we would like to look at them, because if they don't go to DOT and if they're ours, we want to take care of them. If they're not ours, we'll go through Dana's office and through Michelle and make sure who had the easement and who was doing the cuts out there, and we will hold the contractors accountable.
Robert, could you help me clarify something for me? What was the situation at Middleburg? Was it a busted pipe?
Yeah, Middleburg had a busted water line that I'm not sure if it's been repaired, but we're getting it worked on.
It's covered, it's not.
Okay.
And the other one, of course, was Hampton and Oak. I want to say Hampton and.
Right, and it was also a water line on the corner there also.
All right.
Okay.
Good. I appreciate that.
And just to address the utility issues, and as Robert said, we'll find out, who the culprit is of why the road is deteriorating, and then if it was a utility cut or a utility sinking issue, we'll get those taken care of. You're going to see coming to you in the not too distant future a package where we're going to have an outside contractor come help us repair leaks that are active and help us get caught up on utility cut restorations, because we've got some staffing shortages and we're behind, so we're going to supplement our staffing with outside contracting resources. So we're going to try to re-zero, and we're going to do that every quarter until we can get staff back up.
All right.
I noticed you had Trunham, Gervais, and Taylor all out in the last 6 weeks.
We're gonna
We're gonna take it, I just wanted
thank you
to
for the
make-
good work you're doing.
Okay.
All right.
Wanted to make sure there were no other action items in that regard.
Are we good?
Ready?
Yeah, you got the amendments.
Thank you all, right on target, a little ahead, so it's great. There's
You want to stay down here today?
Yeah,
yes, sir, we do
please.
need to stay
Yes,
down
please.
for the first one of the presentations is a PowerPoint.
Mr. Mayor, I move we go into executive session for receipt of legal advice related to pending and threatened potential claim, Code Section 30-4-70A2, Allen Benedict Court Automatic Meter Reading Infrastructure Meter Installations and Taboo. Receipt of legal advice related to matters covered by attorney-client privilege pursuant to 70A2, 125 Peyton Road, sewer expansion fee, Columbia Urban League, external funding requests, hospitality funding, revenue options, legal update 2019, and add Save-A-Lot. Discussions of negotiations incident to proposed contractual arrangement pursuant to 70A2 Finley Park, Park Street improvements, and deferred 2221 Divine Street. Discussion of matters related to proposed location or expansion of services to encourage location or expansion of industries or other business pursuant to 70A2, Project Blue, Ballpark LSC, Prophet Dixon Klein. Discussions of appointment of a person to a public body pursuant to 70A1, Parks and Recreation Foundation. No, there's one more.
Defer item 10.
And defer item 10.
Why are we,
Yes.
let me ask a question.
Yes.
Sir. Why would, can we talk? We just dealt with taboo last week. Are there additional things other than what we decided upon at the last council meeting?
I think y'all, is that just a formality that, something you need to discuss with them?
So we can take that off.
Well, thank you.
You want to talk about taboo?
Thank you, Reverend McDowell, appreciate it. I'm trying to get stuff out.
Very descriptive. I gave the notebook.
I'm glad I did.
Were you that, you weren't.
I gave the notebook
Oh,
back.
my gosh.
Brother.
That was something unique, I gotta tell you.
Okay,
So also,
Why? You don't want the
have
pictures?
that's the second,
That's the thing.
He's like, second?
Well, that's one of the reasons, because I did not want to see that notebook again. And,
I saw you